Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail columnist, Sarah Vine. Very big welcome to both of you. So, front pages. Let's start, shall we, with The Guardian. There are claims on the front page of The Guardian that officials have raised concerns about the conduct of the Health Secretary towards civil servants. The Department of Health and Social Care says it hasn't received any formal complaints relating to its ministers. The Daily Express carries the Home Secretary's pledge to get more police officers on the ground, more boots on the ground, as they put it. The Telegraph says the architect of China's crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong is among the guests at the King's coronation. That story also making the front page of the Daily Mail. The Metro is covering a court case in the US where a magazine writer is accusing Donald Trump of an historic sexual assault. The FT reports on Microsoft's blocked bid to buy video game maker Activision Blizzard, while The Eye carries a warning from doctors urging people not to buy a popular weight loss drug online. And the Daily Star has been investigating whether Jaffa cakes are really the best for dunking in tea. Tonight, they have the proof. It's still wrong, remember? A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us, our guests. So let's head straight to Kevin and to Sarah. Welcome to both of you. A real mixed bag of front pages there, but let's kick off with Sudan. It feels like the story that's happening now, Kevin, beginning to get the testimony of those who've seen dead bodies in the streets, you know, had their cars stones and sticks and money taken off them on the way to the airport, and still so many we know trying to get out.
I know, that's right. If 300 out, there's an estimated 4,000 Britons in Sudan. Of course, not all may want to leave, but the papers still, some have still got on the front page, including the FT. Complaints that the airport, the strip being used, is 40 kilometres north of Khartoum. What's that, about 25 miles? And those having to make the dash, risking their lives. But there we are, a picture of what looks like a family. Very, very grateful to see British Armed Forces personnel. And the government's been accused of being slow off the mark. The FT points out questions will be asked, quite rightly. But these operations are never easy. They're very, very complex. It's not just as if the elite forces, SAS or Marines or whatever, can just go around Khartoum and other parts of Sudan picking people up in cars and getting into the airport. It just doesn't work like that. But it must be terrifying for those who are deciding, really, whether you gamble on staying or leaving.
Yes, just getting the latest figures, actually, from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, now suggesting, just in the last minute or so, that 536 people have been airlifted to safety on 6 flights as the military races against time, obviously, to rescue these citizens. We know we're in a ceasefire. We don't know what's going to happen after the ceasefire. We don't know if people are heading to Port Sudan on the coast, Sarah. And the questions, I suppose, for the British government will rumble on as they continue to try to get people out.
Yes, I mean, they were quite slow off the mark, and it didn't seem to be, we didn't seem to be doing nearly as well as the French, who seemed to get their people out very quickly. We got our diplomats out, didn't we? But the sort of civilians were sort of trapped behind. I mean, it seems to be catching up now. I mean, it's very difficult to know what's going on the ground, although I have to say, Sudan hasn't been a particularly stable country for a while. So, it ought to have been coming down the track for those responsible. Let's just hope they get everyone out as quickly as they can.
Yes, you're right. Issues of South Sudan, issues of Darfur, and no doubt we will get further reports of the Sudanese people also trying to flee. Kevin, just quickly on this, the WHO suggesting they're now going to 5 neighbouring countries. So that's kind of going to be the next phase once nations get their nationals out. No,
that's right. UK papers have been focusing on UK nationals. But we mustn't forget the Sudanese civilians. They lost their democracy with a coup. Two generals are now effectively fighting over the spoils and what happens next. And the Sudanese themselves, most of those dead, if not all, will be Sudanese, the 500 or so. And they go to neighbouring countries, including Chad, with reports now that Chad's destabilised because of the large numbers going over the border. We often hear a lot in the UK, concerns raised about small boats and so on over the channel. But we have very, very few asylum seekers and refugees compared to many other countries.
Let's move on then to the front page of The Guardian, Sarah. After Dominic Raab last week, they bring you Steve Barclay. Officials from the Department of Health have raised concerns about the Health Secretary Steve Barclay's alleged conduct towards civil servants. This is, they say, a Guardian exclusive.
Yes, and they don't actually have any, there's no actual official complaint yet, I think. I mean, I think that the Dominic Raab thing is bound to open the floodgates. I think there is an issue with, we've discussed this before, I think there's, different sort of culture, different age groups, older ministers dealing with younger civil servants, and also the civil servants not necessarily agreeing with the stuff that the ministers are trying to do. In America, they have a system whereby every time there's a change of politics at the top, all the civil servants on one side go, and then they get a whole load new lot in who are, theoretically on the same page as the new administration. We don't have that. We have an impartial civil service, or we're supposed to. But, it holds a lot of soft power. And, this kind of thing is a very good way of putting pressure on the government. Raab went. I think Sunak probably did the right thing. There were elements of the Raab report that I think were a bit troubling. And also, I speaking to friends of mine who are civil servants, I know a few, and I've known a few over the years. I think there was some stuff going on there that wasn't probably, how should we say, that was suboptimal, which is a favourite civil service terminology for something that's actually just not very good. But I don't know anything about Steve Barclay. I've never met him. I'm sure, who knows? I don't know if he's the sort.
Well, I can only quote from The Guardian. We have not verified this ourselves, but they say sources have told them that the civil servants had informally complained to Chris Wormold, the department's permanent secretary, about the way they believed they and colleagues had been treated. They said senior civil servants in the Department of Health and Social Care had privately referred to bullying and other bad behaviour by Barclay towards his staff since he joined the Whitehall Department in July last year. The alleged conduct is denied by Barclay's allies. And I suppose you might say that department, of all others, has seen extraordinary winter pressures, as we know, and reported on all the time. But, away from that, Kevin, this really has opened, a debate about whether you want that presidential system like you get in America, clean sweep, everybody out, in they all come, or we cherish the independence of our civil servants as part of the checks and balances on our government.
No, absolutely. Look, I think there is a case for secretaries of state to have more than a couple of advisors, to take in a small cabinet of political appointees in a department. You would still need a civil service, though, below that, and there would be a connection between the two. And you can be a demanding minister and not be a bully, or you can be a bully who's a demanding minister. And across, I think, all parties, you hear stories about some people. And I wasn't entirely surprised about Dominic Raab because, quite frankly, he was an arrogant prat. But I've not heard stories about Steve Barclay. That department's that department's been under incredible pressure. He will be under an amazing amount of pressure because of the strikes by nurses, doctors, ambulance crews. And I do recall Pat Cullen, the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, say she was concerned about his hostility at one meeting. I think she's a mental health expert, and she was complaining about the aggressive way he was sitting and behaving. Although she didn't make any accusation of bullying, so I'm slightly surprised. But look, we can clear this up very quickly. The Health Select Committee can call the permanent secretary to give evidence on oath. and ask if those informal complaints have been made, then we can take it from there.
Okay, and
but also, I think
Sarah.
There's a question of how you define bullying, isn't there? I mean, I think that's quite an important question. What is bullying? Is it just being a bit short-tempered because somebody hasn't done their job properly, or you don't think they've done their job properly? Or is it targeting someone and undermining them and making them feel miserable and small? That's what I think bullying is. So I think, there's a difference between a minister who's short-tempered, who's frustrated or tired or has got too much on their plate and perhaps doesn't operate politely or kindly enough, and someone who is actively bullying a member of staff in order to make it impossible for them to do their job. So there is a question of...
Yeah. You can have bad behaviour by ministers, and then you can have bullying. And Rob was found to be vindictive, unnecessarily aggressive, intimidating. So I could see why the report by Adam Tolley KC resulted in him having to resign. And he probably jumped before he was pushed, because I don't believe Sunak could have kept him, or some number 10 officials wanted to do that. But Barclay, it's going to require more investigation, because the allegations are there on the front of The Guardian. They can't just be ignored now.
Well, one final paragraph I'm going to read. The department said, the health department, it had not received any formal complaints over the behaviour of its ministers, but did not deny having been alerted to concerns informally in the way sources described. So, as you say, we wait and watch, and that, as they claim, is an exclusive, which, as I say, we have not verified ourselves. Onto the Metro, Sarah. Another day, another court case against the man who may be, who knows, the Republican nominee for president next year.
Can we just stop for 1 second and just say that I feel so sorry for America having to choose between Biden, who is older than Methuselah, and Donald Trump, who may or may not be in jail by the time the election comes around. I mean, it's just awful. I mean, this is a historic case. I think it was 1996. It's supposed to have happened. She's a journalist. She wrote about it and then claims that he then set about destroying her reputation. It's quite hard, isn't it? I don't know. Could you prove? With these historic rape cases, it's very difficult, isn't it, to actually prove, that rape happened. So it's just one person's word against the other. I mean, I don't know whether she has witnesses or not, but I think, I don't think that you would necessarily bring a civil case like this with all the things that comes with that, the expense, the stress, the sort of exposure, unless you really felt that you had to, and she clearly does. So we'll have to see how it unfolds. But it's not the only problem that Trump is facing. There are still a lot of other things coming down the track for him.
Yeah, I mean, this is in New York. I think there's two other ones in New York. Obviously, the one he appeared in court for, apart from anything, one related to his business activities. There's Georgia to come as well. Going to be an interesting summer for him. Meanwhile, let's go to the Metro, shall we? And out goes Andrew Bridgen, representative of North West Leicestershire, after those comments he made. Was it right again, do you think, to see him go, Kevin?
I think so. I think he's completely lost the plot, and it's kind of quite sad in a way. Just leave it apart politics, whether you agree with them or not on other mainstream issues. He's just somebody who doesn't have any sense of reality, I believe, now, and comparing in any way the vaccine program with the Holocaust, and however he did it, and he kind of denies it was quite like that, I think was a lunacy. And there were a lot of questions being asked about him by other MPs and the Tory whips before this about his behaviour and his views. And so he's gone now. That was a Labour seat. He took it in 2010 for the Conservatives and built up a huge majority. So he's going to stand as an independent. I would have thought some of the very small right-wing parties that are nibbling at the Conservative Party, Lawrence Fox's lot and so on, they may try and get him, but I think that's the end of his political career now. He'll lose at the election if he stands as an independent. We saw that with all the Conservatives who were kicked out over Brexit by Boris Johnson in 2019. They stood, some as independents, some went over to Change UK, others Lib Dems, all lost. Not one of them survived. So it's bye-bye Britain.
Yeah, he has insisted he will stand. I just want to quote what he said. I have been a vocal critic of the vaccine rollout and the party have been sure to make an example of me. And then the article goes on to say that around 20 million lives were saved by the COVID vaccine in its first year, according to research from Imperial College London. Sarah, just very quickly, because I need to get... do you want to say something?
Well, I just think he's gone down a sort of conspiracy theorist rabbit hole, hasn't he? And I'm a little bit worried that he's perhaps not terribly well.